Elvis. I'm French, as you can hear. I will be one of your hosts today, and I will animate those 2 days that we're having together. I'm really thrilled to be here. We're going to have 2 days to learn more about innovation in the media industry in Europe. And I'm really thrilled to begin this incredible 2 days to welcome Simon, Nice Matin CEO, on stage to begin with. And then we'll have the honor to have Costas here, professor at the university, and Catherine, the IQ Media Director. Thank you all, and big applause for Simon, please.
Thank you, Marion. I'm going to speak in English. First of all, thank you because you offer me the opportunity to practice my English, which is really poor. So I'm sorry. Forgive me if it's not so perfect. Thank you, all of you, for attending this conference, and welcome to Nice, this beautiful city that embraces the charm of the French Riviera and France itself. Nice is more than a postcard. It's a dynamic hub of culture, innovation, and expertise, a place where past and future meet elegantly. It's in this empowering environment that our Nice Matin group was born and grew up with a strong ambition to inform and connect citizens in our region and beyond. We are also part of our region heritage. By the way, next year we'll celebrate our 80th anniversary. For sure, we'll organize a great party, and you are all invited to blow up the candles, to drink champagne and Froga. I'm just kidding. Here it's more rosé et pambania. Seriously. Our group, Nice Matin, is built on 3 major brands: Nice Matin, which everybody knows, Var Matin, and Monaco Matin, or I will say Monte Carlo Matin, with an average per circulation around 85,000 on weekdays, and reach on the website more than nearly 50 million visits per month. Above all, we have an incredible team of nearly 600 persons, journalists, technicians, and employees, plus our correspondents and personnel in charge of the press delivery every morning. Together, we share the same ambition, providing quality local journalism that is close to the concern of our readers here. Today, we face huge challenges. Like all press organizations in France and around the world, the press industry is going through a deep transformation. The habits of information consumption are changing with the rise of digital platforms, social networks, and especially new technology such artificial intelligence. For a group like Nice Matin, I believe this transformation, and especially artificial intelligence, is a huge opportunity to grow up and expand more than a risk. Like all industries, our profession is evolving with AI, and we must need to change our model and structure to continue our primary mission to inform accurately and transparently. Artificial intelligence allows us some tasks, which lets us assign more valuable tasks to our teams. For example, it helps us to analyze data faster and more precisely, and offers us new opportunities like creating personalization for our reader experience on our website. Personally, it helps me every day. Who knows if AI completely works this speech? I will let you decide at the end of my words. We also have additional mission regarding artificial intelligence, which is to inform and educate the public about those societal changes. Our actions are helping people to understand AI without fear and highlighting the many projects everywhere in our territory. Creation of startup, implementation of a school dedicated school, and production of events. And the global dynamic supported by our economic and cultural actors, which is really crazy in this region. But we also have a crucial role. We have an ethical responsibility to use those technology carefully to fight misinformation and maintain the trust to our readers. Those three missions are ones we are dedicated to upholding in our organization and in our publication. That's why in 2003 we joined the IQ Media project, incredible project led by University of Athens and our media colleague here in this room in Greece, Cyprus and Portugal, thanks to Europe. Since we joined IQ Media Hub, incredible energy driven by our teams everywhere has started internally, leading to many initiatives. First of all, the organization of few masterclass with great experts like Frederica, Gerald Olubowicz, and Alexandra Genet. Maybe some of them are in the room. And then launch a newsletter published every 2 months with several hundred subscribers to keep us with news from the hub and the latest in media and AI. Also, the Academy launched in spring, which support our colleagues in training data journalists and participating in masterclass. And finally, this conference that we organize today, the next one will be held in Athens, thank you, in April next year. All those initiatives were made possible thanks to the support of, I said just before, European Union, thanks to them, but mostly University of Athens, represented today by Catherine, director of the IQ Media Hub, and Kostas as the scientific coordinator. As well as my colleagues, 4 media members of the consortium, Alpha Cyprus in Cyprus, Katimerini and Wikimedia in Greece, and Apiprensa in Portugal. Thanks to all of you. But most of all, I'd like to say a huge thank you to my team, especially Flora, somewhere, Flora, Sophie Hamburg, Sophie Casal, and Olivier Marino, our journalists, and Olivia, somewhere, Audrey, and Thomas, who helped them to produce not just only this conference, but all the initiative I said before. You all carry this project with an extraordinary energy from the beginning, with so much passion, professionalism and commitment. As we say in France, vous déchirez, and I'm so proud of you. My last word is dedicated to all of you. Thank you everyone for being here, and especially participants who have joined us for the conference panel discussion. Thanks to you, it will be incredible. So, I wish you an excellent conference. Thank you.
Thank you all, and now we welcome Kostas Molas, professor at the Athens University and academic coordinator for the IQ Media project. Oh, yeah. Just a second, sorry. For those who would like to hear the conferences in French, you have all the little stuff here. Yeah, that will translate it from one language to the other native music. Kostas, you're in.
Thank you very much. Yes, so it's very glad and very happy being with you. It's very nice to be in the city named Nice from the Greek word victory, and we're happy happy that we are so close, and we feel very happy to be with you. And I want to thank everyone, all the participants that you are here with us. Special thanks to Ms. Martin that organized this very nice conference. And I'm sure that it will be very effective and very productive today. I want also to thank my team in Greece who runs this project and coordinates this project, how they help it to be possible to have this event now, all these activities in our project. As you can see, the project is coordinated by a university, and maybe you can think why a university and an academic institution coordinates a media project. We think that the technology is the word that joins the two areas, because I think that technology, and we all believe that technology has changed the way that journalistic tasks are implemented now. We see that we need new approaches, new methodologies. We need to educate the journalists in the new areas in order to see how the content will be produced and disseminated nowadays. So we see here that in this project we try to educate with all these actions to the journalists and also to find new business model that technology give us these opportunities. We can go to the next session. We are the National Competition University of Athens. It's top university in the country with many departments and many graduate programs. Especially for us, we are a media department that is dedicated on media, and actually we try to, in my laboratory that I coordinate, it's a laboratory specialized in digital media and interactive environments. So in this laboratory you can see not only the people that we don't have any slides, okay. The power, yes, the technologies has to do with electricity. We cannot live without that. I mean, this is the only dependence that we have. So I remember my slides, but I don't know if you can upload it. I don't know. Okay, so. For me, we have this opportunity to collaborate in this special project that was written years before, and we try to bring, as I said, the results and the research that happens in academia to the media organization. We believe that with this connection, we see how the research results go to the industry, and also we'll see the problems that exist in the industry, and we try to solve this in academia. Also, with the new era of artificial intelligence, we see that it's a new way of producing and disseminating the content. So for us, it's something that we have to study, because we don't know yet the effects of this technology in the organization. So as academic institution, we want to be close with the journalists, with the media organization, in order to see the changes that happen there, and together we design new methods, new business models, or new ways of working together with the journalists. And since science means know well a specific topic, for us it's good to be close to the industry that has these new opportunities with this technology and the AI technology, to see how all these media organizations work together and how they can change the way that they produce and disseminate their content. So we believe that with this new way of bringing together academia and industry, we can give a new role to the journalist, to make him more independent, to make him more scientific, I say, because we believe that now the role of the journalist has to do with new approaches. It's not the traditional one. We have to think new roles, new directions to this professional role. So, the project that we have in the university is not only like media. We try to, and we see that we have to move, as I said, all the knowledge that exists in our laboratory, in the academia. You can see not only IT media, but analysis. It's a training in media professional advanced high-impact digital technologies, where we try to train the professional on how to analyze and make fact-checking. As you know, it's a big problem in the media now, that how we can train the media professional to advance, to apply the technologies for fact-checking and just to see the fake news and all of that. So currently we have that project. Previously we worked on AI approaches to create an intelligent advisor predicting perceived quality journalism. This is another project that used the artificial intelligence to create intelligent advisor, helping the journalists to create quality journalistic content. And now we are working on Calypso. It's a collaborative analysis and exposure of disinformation, where it's a creation of a platform where we try to bring to the audience the possibility to flag possible news that exists in social media, in order for the journalists to see if something is fake or not. So we can change the slide. Yes, our vision is that we believe that journalistic scientific field is not properly certified, and we're working on this in trying to enrich our syllabus in order to develop and expand journalistic skill set regarding emerging technologies and business needs. We are trying to advance this profession with new skills and dedicated on new technologies and AI. And also, since we have the knowledge and the background of digital tools and computational methods and AI and approaches, user experience solution, we believe that can be tools for a pro-democratic news at the intersection of industry and academia. Okay, this is my short introduction. I'm sure that we have a very productive, a very nice conference today, and I will wait you all in Greece, in Athens, the next year, around April. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much, Kostas. And now we welcome on stage Catherine. Catherine, you're the director of IQ Media. Welcome. Keep your mic close to your
Good morning, everyone. We're very happy to be here. We're very happy to see all of you. We had 130 people joining, so thank you. A big applause for everyone in the room, please. I wanted to scan these barcodes, this one in particular, the project that we host here today. So we offer master classes for everyone. We also offer classes and courses that are online. So please, everyone go to the iqmedia.com and join our newsletter. You will not only find interesting things that we are doing, but you will also find a lot of innovation that goes on in Europe. And we will have a lot of experts from the UK and the US as well. We will organize a summer school in Athens and a conference, as Simon said before, after Perugia Festival. So keep in mind the dates. after Perugia Festival. So if you go to Italy, then please join us in Athens after that. It will be a very, very interesting conference for you, since you're here and you like artificial intelligence, innovation, you want to learn about your business model. So please join us, join the newsletter, and I hope you will find everything interesting today. We will have a lot of workshops, both in French and in English. If somebody works at the media organization, or if you have an idea that you want to pitch to me, we will resubmit for a new project. So please come and find me or Kostas so we can discuss about your ideas and maybe based on what you want to do and how you want to innovate in your newsroom. So we are, open to suggestions, open to your ideas. We are a hub. The whole vision is to connect with each other, connect academia with the industry, not only in Athens, in France, in Portugal, and in Cyprus, but all over Europe and hopefully all over the world. So thank you for being here. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and I'll be here to ask any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one on stage is Federica, who needs to connect her laptop first. The Director of Development at Reuters Institute.
All right. Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. Groupe Nice Media, Nice Matin, IQ Media et tout vous pour être ici. My French is not good enough for this presentation in French, so I'll switch to English. So I've been asked today to speak about what challenges publishers are facing and how we could overcome them. So we really like to think about challenges and opportunities at the same time. First, what's the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, which is the organization where I work, very much in the same spirit of connecting academia and professionals. We are based at Oxford University, and we're dedicated to exploring the future of journalism through debate, engagement, and research. It means we have 3 programs. We have a fellowship program where mid-career journalists can come and spend between 3 and 6 months at the Institute. Research is something that is relevant for the profession. We have the leadership development programs, which is the one I run, which are all courses and programs for media leaders. This might mean editor-in-chief and CEOs, but it also mean like new managers, really focusing on the essential skills for being a manager in the newsroom, as well as facing strategic challenges and digital transformation. And our research, which is probably what we're most known for, which really wants to bring evidence-based research and social science methods to journalism, and to do it in a way that provides insights to the profession that are hopefully applicable and understandable immediately for the profession. So that's what I'm going to do today. You'll hear from me tomorrow as well. Today I decided to focus on the external challenges and market forces that publishers are facing. And tomorrow, with Thomas Heymann, we'll look a bit more about the internal challenges in the newsroom about change and innovation. But first, I think this is the most important sentence I'll say in the entire presentation. And it's something that our former director, Rasmus Nielsen, used to say at every single presentation he used to give. And is we shouldn't forget that journalism exists in the context of its audience. And so any piece of investigative research, everything that we publish, really only makes sense if we have an audience and we connect with them and we deliver value to them. And this is really important for us to remember. And in this spirit, so what I'm going to present today are some insights from our Reuters Institute News Report, which is, as far as we know, the most comprehensive research on news consumption around the world. It's based on insights on the 6 continents, 47 markets, 95,000 respondents, and it's the 13th year that we've been doing it, which means that we have the ability to look at data over time and see trends and evolution. It's based on an online polling, and as such, it tends to underrepresent traditional news behavior, especially in some countries. There's a bit of a skew about, for example, in India, it's more about English-speaking India. And it's research is conducted on our behalf by YouGov between January and early February 2024. We're already working on the new one. It's supported by 18 different organizations and sponsors, including Google News Initiatives, but also the BBC, media regulators, and like Ofcom, and many others. The main author of the report is Nick Newman and our fantastic research team. So I have highlighted 8 main challenges that publishers are facing, and hopefully while we look at them, we can also start to point to some ways of addressing them. And the first is looking at the context and the changes in consumption. Over time, how people access the news has really changed. So we can see from 2013 to now to 2024, we can see that TV and print, which were the main ways that people had to access news back in 2013, so a sharp decline, especially for print. This is data from the UK. I have a couple of slides from other markets, but it generally is a trend that is true all over the world. At the same time, social media really saw a growth, especially around 2016, 2017, and then sort of remained a bit flat. And online has remained flat throughout. But recently we started looking and analyzing sort of like a new theme, if you want. And it's the people who say that consume none of these options. Now, they live in the world, so they might be exposed to news and information just by being around. But they don't actively go and look out for news. So they say that 10% in the UK actually doesn't use any of these sources. As I said, pictures are a bit different in some countries, but the main trends you can see are sort of the same. Decline in TV and print in some countries like Italy or France. The decline of TV is a bit less pronounced than in other places, but again, still a decline. Flat social media, flat online, and none of these sources kind of coming through. This is Greece. Again, you can see the trend, and on our website you can find country pages for all the 47 markets. So if you want to know more specifically about your country, you can read it there. This sort of leads us to the second point, which we've identified, which is these people who say, like, I'm not interested or I don't look at any of these sources of news. And it's really, we picked up a decline in interest, really a loss of connection that audiences have with news brand, and specifically younger audiences, but we'll see this. Again, it's a picture that changes around the world, but you can see here several markets, particularly pronounced, for example, in a country like the UK, where we went from 70% saying they're interested in news to only 38% saying they're actually interested in news. And you can see how it plays out in some of the markets. It's not the same everywhere, so some countries are a bit more stable. The Nordic countries often stand out in this data. And in this kind of insights, there are a lot of other sort of like factors that affect this. But again, it's not the same picture everywhere. In some countries it's more pronounced, but generally we can see a decline in interest and a fluctuation. And alongside this fact that people start to say, not really interested in news, there's another sort of like group that we call selective news avoiders. These are people who say that yes, they're interested in news, yes, they consume news, but often or sometimes they just choose to disconnect. So this is the data across all markets. It was 29% in 2017, it's 39% last year, 3% more from the year before. So they follow the news, but either at specific times of the day, they choose to limit their consumption of news, or maybe they're on social media and they see a post of news coming through and they just scroll it through more fast, or maybe only watch one TV program of news, so really limiting their consumption and their exposure to news. Why? Mainly because they say they're just like worn out. It's too much, the news is depressing, the news is difficult to understand, the news is irrelevant to their daily life, and so they just choose to disconnect. And this is, of course, media a big challenge, because if we said that journalism exists in the context of its audience, and we have an audience that is more and more saying not that interested in news in general, and when it's interested in news, at times say it's just too much, I can't take it anymore, and disconnect. I have a big question about how do we reconnect with this audience and how do we keep that relationship alive. And then again, you can see a couple of quotes of why people, they say they disconnect, it's overwhelming, it's too much, I have to stop. So, what approaches might help these news avoiders across markets to be more interested? So they talk about coverage that is more positive. Now, this is always a debate with journalists, because journalists always say, it's not our fault, there are wars across the world, that the world is difficult, we have a duty to report stories, and especially the stories that are difficult, absolutely. But at the same time, those people who say that it's a bit too much, they talk about they want something that will help them understand. So they want explainers. So much and so often in journalism, they try to just like take things for granted and sort of like assume that everyone knows the context, and said people say we want to understand better why this is relevant, why this is matter for me, for my life. And something that it doesn't only point to the problems, but also sometimes to the solution, and makes me feel with more agency to be able to do something. Now the problem is that this is what the people who say they avoid news sometimes would want to see more. But the people who actually probably are the ones driving traffic to your website, the most loyal users you have, probably are the ones that buy a subscription and therefore help you with your sustainability, are the ones that are most driven by big stories of the days, the big updates, and really getting into the news cycle. So we started to see a dichotomy here. We have, of course, part of the audience which is really, really engaged, really want to keep on top of things. You have live blogs, you'll know, those do very well, people are really into it. But alongside that, with another group that says, I'm not interested, or this is not relevant to me, or this is too much. So how do we work for both of them, especially in a context of public interest journalism, with the idea of having to serve the majority of the public? So we said at the beginning that the sources of consumption have changed, and we saw the difference between TV, print, online. And we saw that online was flat, but at the same time, of course, that we know online, it's websites, but of course it's a lot of like social platforms. And so how important are these platforms these days? And how much, and we saw at the beginning, there was sort of a younger generation factor playing in, what does it mean? So this is when we look at online news, and we see that when people are over 35, the way that they choose to get to their news, so the gateways to news, so the door through which they access news, it goes sort of like split between 25% goes direct, but also 25% that comes to news through social media, and 25% that comes through news through social. And of course there are mobile alerts, aggregators, emails, but mainly this is a split. Look what happens with under 35. We were talking about a risk of loss of connection, but under 35 are much less likely to go direct. So this is only 14% that says to go direct to a news website, and really uses mainly social and search, but mainly social as a way to get to news. And so again, this is quite important when we think about how do we cater. There is no such thing as a one audience, right? We have so many different audiences and so many different segments of audiences. So when we think about how do we cater for all of them, and how do we produce journalism that is relevant and gets to all of these different audiences, and this is a big split, right? Where do we focus our attention? This is data from the UK. If you look, it's not just about, so this is like plus 25, but 18 to 24 specifically are really different from how the previous generation was behaving in terms of going directly to a website all the time. So late millennials are more behaving similarly, and then there is really even more pronounced split the more we proceed. So we talk about social media, and this year we talk about what we call the platform reset, and what we've seen a really growing importance of video, which takes us to what kind of format should news organization produce to meet these audiences. So we know that Facebook has been, for a long time, one of the main platforms on social that people use to get to news. And just to be on in Facebook generally, and to use Facebook to get to news. But we can see a very sharp decline. This, of course, also matches with internal deprioritization from Meta and Facebook as a company towards news, algorithm changes. Everyone who worked in the newsroom might remember when the algorithm immediately changed at some point and traffic disappeared overnight. So again, a big drop, still important, 26%, but a big drop, and a growth of not really new platform, because they've been around for a while, but sort of like different platform. So the old social media, let's call it like Facebook, X, which was Twitter, really are not that relevant anymore. And we see the growth of platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and WhatsApp, and different, and Instagram, different degree, but a bit Snapchat, but especially Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. What do they have in common? They are much more video-led and image-led than the previous one. So TikTok, useful news, is the fastest growing social platform in terms of consume for news. So overall, 26% of people across markets in our survey said that they use TikTok for any purpose, and 13% said that they use TikTok for news. It's really driving in some global south countries, and we've seen in some of these countries that had elections recently how big of a role they played really engaging the younger generation in terms of news and in terms of engagement with audiences. Of course, it's not the same picture everywhere. It's more limited in places like France or Germany compared to the 29% of Indonesia, but that's one of the platforms that is growing. YouTube also continues to grow, and we can see again, this is just to give you an idea of how it changes around the world, but 61% overall say they use YouTube for any purpose, and 31% use YouTube for news. And we started seeing also different behaviors and a lot of podcasts, weirdly, through YouTube. So again, new platform coming through, and platforms that are really much more visual and video-led. So why is video news consumption so high across all these formats? This is some of the reason why people say they like, this is like some of the different formats why people that consume. Again, changes across different countries, but it's both short form, long form, and live news streams. And when we look about the reasons why people prefer consuming video over text, text is still, the majority prefers text over video, so it's still not a complete switch. Like all of these changes that I talk about are never one in, one out, right? Are like long shift over time, which makes it even more complicated because it's never possible to say, okay, print is declining, goodbye print, just digital. No, print is still there, still relevant, still very important for some audiences, but a new segment of audience with a different audience behavior is coming through. Similarly with this, text is still very relevant, still preferred by the majority, but we can see this rise of preference for video. Reasons. People see it as more authentic and trustworthy. Now we can discuss about that. especially with the latest slide that I present about AI. But there is this idea that first everyone, everywhere with a camera can record and it feels more authentic, but also that there could be more unedited, with less bias or political spin. There is confidence of the platform, so it's short, easy to watch, then I can get enough of what I need in a short time, and it just like provides me different perspectives. And again, this is not universal, but it's some of the reason people are saying we prefer watching videos, and remember how much also the younger generation is driving this behavior. Okay, we said that platforms are shifting, that people are more driven to news less directly and more mediated through what we call like side doors access, social, that they're generally not always very interested, that platforms on social are changing, but when they're on social, who do they pay attention to where they look for when they look for news on social platforms? And so this is another interesting thing. Sorry, there's a lot of data, I don't know how well you can see from the bottom, but what this slide is saying is basically that what were the old so-called social media, Twitter, Facebook, people tend to pay more attention to mainstream media and mainstream journalists. Now, on so like new growing platforms like YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, people tend to pay more attention to personality influencers, creators, if you want, we can call them, than to mainstream news sources. This is when they talk about the news, right? So it's not about that they're just looking on TikTok about an influencers about beauty. This is about getting newsworthy content, or what is perceived by the audiences as a news and information, just not from traditional actors that we tend to more like traditionally consider the source of news, like mainstream media and journalists. And really this year we look at sort of like these voices and creators. So this is a US, and the most mentioned individual journalist account are people like Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, Alex Jones. You might notice something, they're all men. And it's not a different picture in the UK. Robert Paston, Piers Morgan, Owen Jones, they're all, again, men is just the most mentioned, and so really more driven towards personalities and names than brands when they are on these platforms. And France, again, one woman, is a fourth as most mentioned. But in many of these cases, these are people, if you think about the US, Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan, there are people who are very opinionated, usually very split on the political spectrum, sometimes more on the right, not always, but tend to be more on the right. So really a more politicized and a more polarized debate and voice that these people are paying attention to. And really news organizations are really losing to some of these young creators that, you know, compare BBC News at the time that numbers might have changed a bit by the time of this slide. BBC News had 3 million followers, and now on TikTok, and now compares to like people like Dylan Page or Peter Speha, who does like a news under the desk with like massive followers compared to traditional publishers. So again, a sort of like a different way of talking, a different way of addressing serious work, serious stuff, right? This is about Gaza, but from a different kind of providers that we usually associate with journalism. And as we said, is like a growth of partisan content really growing, getting grounds in online platform. Also included longer form. Some of those creators that we saw before have very long YouTube, for example, engagement and time. Okay, big question that brings in at this point, which is what I've underlined as a sixth challenge for publishers, and it's really about trust and misinformation. It's not been the rosiest picture in terms of trust for quite a while. So this is how much people say they trust news. We asked both like as news in general and news they personally use. And in general, across average, it's only not even 0.5% of the people in the survey, they say that they trust the news most of the time. Massive changes across different places. Finland has one of the highest, their highest percentage, 69% people they say they trust news most of the time, to a lower as like Greece or Hungary, and the United States also quite low. So again, the trend has been downwards for a bit. It changes across different places, but if we couple that with the declining interest, with the idea of feeling overwhelmed, also this sense of like not really being able to trust news most of the time. Why? There are a few things that correlate. These are just like some examples. You can see, for example, in the UK, Brexit vote, really divisive election, really helped driving down. The Gilets jaunes in France also drives down because these are all like very polarized moment. Society really splits. COVID is a bit of a bump that we saw across many markets because what we've guessed is that because people really felt the need to go back to the news to access vital information. In many cases, we're telling them truly things about life and death and about how to behave. So they're really going back to a sense of using the news as a service that was really delivering value to them. And then it's sort of like going flat again. Again, if you want more on your own country, there are the country pages. Some of the things that correlate with trust in news, one is exposure to media criticism. So the more that people hear the media being criticized, and guess by who, mostly about politicians or political activists. So the more that there's this narrative around fake news and the media being the enemy of the people, the more it's sort of like this idea of polarization even grows. And of course, again, this is just an example of how much polarization and politics drive this. So it's not just about what journalists and the news organization can do about this. It's a lot of other factors, of course, that influence it. It's about the public discourse around society, but also around journalism. So you can see in a place like Finland again, where there is much more political, higher political consensus, not really a fake news narrative. Yes, there is a bit of a split, and elections are always a moment of contentious, but not as much as you can see in a place like the United States, where really the people on the left and the people on the right are really split. Misinformation is a growing concern in many countries, especially elections. This year was the last one just a couple of days ago, but many countries have gone through election this year, and 59% of people across all markets say they are concerned about being able to identify what's news and what's fake, what they find on the internet. And of course, with AI and the ability of create generated images, this sort of like question about how do we identify what's new, what's real and what's fake is even more relevant, for example. So we can discuss this later. What are the most important factors for people to decide if a news is trustworthy or not? Now, we should also say that the fact that someone says that the news media is trustworthy or not doesn't mean that the media is worth of trust by itself, right? This is not a judgment on how that particular media brand is trustworthy or not. It's how people perceive it. So in some countries, again, where there's a very strong narrative from authoritarian regimes against media brands that are particularly critical of the government, obviously that tend to influence, especially if the authoritarian regime has strong consensus, that influence the perception of that media brand. So this is not a judgment about what a media is trustworthy or not, but it's a perception of trustworthiness, which of course is relevant because it's what drives audiences to consume or not to use a specific media. And so what really people say is that one of the main factors in defining if media are trustworthy or not are how transparent and open they are. And so we saw some brands like the BBC really doubling down on this idea. They launched a new sort of like internal brand called BBC Verified, sort of like a stamp of extra approval that really say, of course they say it about every news they put out, but really doubling down on this idea. We've verified it, we bring it to you. They sometimes create short videos with journalists that explain the behind the scene of the story. They take the audience behind the scene of how they got to a specific investigation, for example, high journalistic standards, but also represents people like me fairly. So really opens a discussion which we can have tomorrow when we look more about internal forces that affects change, is how diverse our newsrooms are and how much they reflect the public that we're trying to serve, because so important is for people to see themselves represented, not just seeing the news is relevant to them, but see themselves represented in the news. And again, otherwise it drives even more the idea that the news is something that's like distant from us and not relevant. Of course, all of these challenges haven't taken into account yet business challenge. So it's not just about connecting with the audience, finding an audience, but really how do we sustain this operation? And as we said before, because so many of these are not just changes from one thing to the other, but shifts that happen over time, that's also a big shift that we've seen happening in the last 10 to 15 years, is really a move from mainly an advertised-based revenue model to a reader revenue model. Now, the picture hasn't changed for the last 3 years. Overall, across the 20 markets that we look at, it's only 17% of people who say they pay for online news specifically. Again, my changes. UK is quite low. Italy, France is 11%. It grows in some other countries, going specifically the Nordics. So this is just an idea of how much it changes. And really has been leveling off. Of course, it was driven at some point by a pivot to pay. So many news organizations started to focusing on reader revenue, introducing paywalls, introducing registration walls. So of course that created an uptick. And then so like tighten up paywalls have gone from X amount of number of articles that you consume for free, and then you get asked to convert, and now much more sophisticated ways of thinking about this conversion, this like journey, and bringing people through this funnel of like going from random visitors to a loyal reader to a subscriber. Coronavirus helped again a bit with the bump, and now we're seeing some leveling off, some increase, but also some decline across countries. We talk about winner takes most dynamic in this case. So in the majority of the markets is usually one of two main national titles. It takes take the lion's share of it, so they take the majority of the subscription. It depends, like not just two, in some cases a bit more, but like it's a small amount of like top high-end brands that take that. The usually median number of subscription is just one, but in recent year we saw that more and more people are like now getting maybe two, and then again it's kind of like you can see while publishers are really thinking about what we call the bundle, and so really bundling up different subscriptions or thinking about different products, like New York Times, really thinking about games and cooking and other things that are around the news that can just help drive the subscription. But also in some cases bundles with like local titles, and again it changes a lot in terms of how much, like in the UK only 8% subscribe to a local title, but it goes up to 50% in Switzerland, for example. So it can really changes a lot in terms of this, and of course it depends on the market, on the offer, etc. And also like foreign subscriptions, especially. Lastly, AI and news. So Of course, we started to look this year, both in the Digital News Report and some specific other research that we've added in how audiences are thinking about AI. So this is not about how news organizations are adopting AI in their operations, but what's the perception that audiences have towards the use of AI. And so really putting the public at the center, we think that the public uptake, so how much people in their everyday life will start using AI and consuming AI-mediated information will have, of course, an influence on the broader ecosystem of news, obviously, and of course, media in here as well. There may be other technologies like VR or AR, NFTs that really seem to have a very big wave of buzz, but then maybe you didn't see exactly the same uptake in the public. So how generative AI will be adopted by the public, of course, will have impact on the ecosystem. So these 3 studies that we've have, you can find them on our website, News Report, but also a specific study across 6 countries about how the public feels about it, and a more qualitative research about the attitudes of the public we published before. Of course, things change very quickly, right? So the News Report, for example, was out, the survey was in the field in January, February 2024. So things might change quickly, and in next year, which is going to be out in June, we might see a very different picture, but this is how we sort of keep in track. And the second one was fielded in April, May, so a bit more recent. It's still early days. Often researchers say like both is still early days and more research is needed, but it's still early days to kind of really assess the impact. But if we start with like awareness, how aware people are of different generative AI tools, and we can see that, for example, it's just like some of the data from the US, the awareness of some tools like ChatGPT is much higher than other tools, like we've just like listed a few, like Perplexity, Midjourney, that are like, again, like there's a bit of like different awareness, and 20 to 30% of the people said they've never heard of any of this. So it's still slow to kind of like pick up. Using generative AI are mainly around getting information, creating media, getting advice, which is not to say getting the latest news, right? Again, it's all this concept about what we consider news, what we consider information, what the public makes a difference. But still, only 5% try to use generative AI to get news, so it's still not really mass popular at the moment. But what do they think about it? How do they think about different sectors using generative AI? And so people think that AI will have a big impact on many sectors, especially you can think about science, of course, like healthcare professional, military, of course, news media will be impacted as much as science and healthcare, and some a bit less, like ordinary people, retailers, will have maybe a slightly less impact. But then we also ask how confident you are that these different sectors will use it responsibly. And again, it's early days, but I think it's interesting to start thinking about this now, while we're thinking what kind of approach news media are taking towards generative AI, to really try to maybe counterbalance some of these early signs. And again, so there is a high trust in how science and healthcare will use and how responsibly they will use AI. Lower trust in how news media, politics, and social media will use generative AI. Again. And it's not just about using it itself, right? It's about the different ways in which people think that AI will have an impact. And so when the news is produced mainly by AI, with some human oversight, the people are like a bit less comfortable. So there is still very much the idea that you want the human in the loop. you want a human involved. So it's not just about creating fully automated and generated content. People really feel more comfortable when they know there has been a human in the loop in creating this. And there is a bit more acceptance when AI is used in journalistic practice behind the scene. You know, we've been using grammar spell check forever in all our documents, so we don't even think about it anymore. It's not generative AI, but again, we've got used to some use of AI, which of course AI has been around for a while. It's like this new wave of generative part, but so that's more comfortable with people with AI being used in the background. And slightly less acceptance when it comes to actually creating full automated content. And again, it varies depending on the medium. More acceptable when it's about text. It's getting more difficult when it's about photos and videos. Again, I think it's going to be interesting to see in the future how that thing plays out, with people saying they think video is more trustworthy because you can trust it more, and now we can see that we actually can generate and modify a lot of it. So it's going to be interesting to see how it develops. So some thoughts. Big tech and many newsrooms may be ahead of the public in terms of awareness, but we were late to the game in the internet, we were late to the game in social media. Maybe it's good that we are ahead in this thing, thinking about it. But we have to keep on track with how people will be thinking about it, what the larger impact on society will be. But be aware there is a bit of skepticism on how trustworthy and comfortable people feel that media will approach this. So we cover a lot of things. Apologies if I've overwhelmed you with slides. But the big picture is really this. So there is a lot of attention like loss for media in general. People disconnecting, people are less interested. When they are on social media, they're paying attention not to what we consider mainstream usual actors. There are new platforms that are taking more relevance, that are more video and image-led in an environment when trust is generally fading, and there are a lot of growing concerns about misinformation. And AI gets into this picture by still being cautious about how we use it for producing news, but of course also we need to see the value and the opportunities of using it to advance some of the things we're doing. The point is often that if people are not really super satisfied with the content we're producing at the moment and they feel it's irrelevant, producing more and more cheaply of the same thing that people are not connecting with is probably not going to be the answer, but really thinking about what are those levels of trust, what are those actors and people and ways of talking and narratives that really connect with the audience. We saw it through COVID, we saw it in moments where people really need the news and information, then trust grows, and then the connection gets re-established. A lot more on our website and on our research more general, and if you have any questions or anything you want to discuss or anything that you're experiencing yourself in your day-to-day news consumption, either as an audience member or as a journalist, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you a lot, Federica. We have a few minutes for questions, so I'm happy to give the mic to whoever might have one.
Thank you for this presentation. You've talked about the BBC, who has a fact-checking, internal fact-checking system. I know that in France also. Do you have any idea if there is an independent, international, I don't know, gathering of journalists who take care of this question? Because, you know, it's a bit untrusty to have the publishing house doing the fact-checking ourselves.
Not in terms of data to say like what's the correlation, like the exact correlation. I don't have that data in terms of like exact correlation, like people seeing a fact check and being effective or not. I don't have data on that. There are consortium and organizations on the European fact-checking network that really brings together different brands that either do have a fact-checking unit like the BBC, but also organizations like FOFACT. I know Le Monde, for example, had a fact-checking unit. I think they still have it. There are organizations that sort of like bring together expertise to think about what is the impact. I think on the BBC, the point was that the BBC Verify is just, it's more than just a fact-checking, of course, is around that. But it's really like putting a stamp on like, this has been approved by our process, and really this has been like, we show you the process. Ross Atkins on BBC does these short videos where it takes complicated issues and sort of like unpacks it and brings in different data and different information to explain it. So it's a mix of like explaining and data and facts. Fact-checking is slightly different, but I think it goes into that pool of let's show you the transparency and the openness of the process, and let's tell you how we've gone through that point.
Are we able to measure the effectiveness of fact-checking? Because I have a bias or an assumption that fact-checking news only serves people who already think it's true. Oh, okay, that was false, and it's a reference, but it will never convince people that think it's.
I don't have that data. I know there have been studies that try to really look at how effective it is. There is a bit of a debate. I think more broadly what you say is an important point, and again speaks to the fact that we have so many different segments of audiences, right? And a lot of what we do is optimize to speak to that audience that trusts us, sees us, come to us, pays for us. Obviously, right? You have to optimize for that part of the audience that follows you, but that risks sometimes leaving behind some pockets of audiences that either don't trust us already, and so what's the impact of that fact-checking on someone that tend to trust the brand already versus someone who's really disconnected. And so I don't have that data specifically on effectiveness, but I think there's a question around who are we talking to, and using a narrative that works very well with some audiences already very, and there is correlations, like people who have high interest in politics tend to follow more of the news. People are less connected with politics are also less interested in the news. So they're not just things that media itself and the journalism itself can just like change, but it's thinking about the full ecosystem.
I have the microphone. Your presentation includes newspapers and digital, but my question is, on digital you observe only websites, platforms. Are you trying to observe new tools for diffusion? Like just while you were speaking, I just challenge of ChatGPT. The new version is ChatGPT Search, and I asked it to make me a resume of the daily news, and it works.
Yeah.
So there's new, like music now you have playlist, maybe tomorrow you will have a playlist of news or something like that.
Yeah, we always try to keep ahead of that. So now in this digital news report, it's going to be fielded very soon. We are looking at that, and of course, search generative AI has been talked about for a long time, and we'll have to see exactly how it comes out. Generally on Google search, we've talked about first was the overview, now is the AI overview at the top, how we'll display the links, and in search, ChatGPT, but also Perplexity, how physically is displayed, right? Do you see a source? Do you get a link, etc.? So we will keep track of that. There is not much of that in here yet, because that was like the majority was filled between January and February 24, and then April and May, and these things change so fast. But yes, we're looking at that as well.
Because
This is
there
very
is the
important.
merging of
Yes.
on-demand news.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
that's something.
absolutely.
I have a question, a comment and a question. I'm just
Sorry.
regarding trust,
Yeah.
because the study says that news publishers, traditional news, are low trust from the public. But when you ask people what they trust the most in the media and all the channels they have to get the news, they always say that the publisher, the printed publisher, they have the highest level of trust, and you have, in the end, the social media that are very low. So people are very skeptical about what they get from social media, but they just get more and more content from it. And we see, I'm working for an association of publishers, so I'm pretty much concerned by the topic, you can imagine. And I see a contradiction between this level of trust when you ask the people, do you trust media, do you trust this terrible mainstream media, which is like the same way to call like a small weekly in a small area in France and the biggest TV channel.
We don't tell them mainstream,
No,
like we
I
just
know.
let it, but yeah, but no, I see what you mean.
You understand? It's, and
Yeah.
there's really a gap between what you trust the most and do you trust media, and that's pretty.
Yeah.
I think a difference in the mind of the.
I agree. I think there is a contrast there. Like we call it a trust gap. So the more people say they go through social media, but then they say that they trust the content they find on it less, yet they keep going. And in some cases, they say there's a lot of like tradition that also carries, like in terms of like how a brand might be trusted or not, especially on a brand level. Like new brands that maybe like follow all the processes that people say are interested, like openness and transparency, etc., but they have less history. So I tend to say, a brand that's been around for a long time has an idea and a perception of trustworthiness. Those really skew high. So like a lot of the new online-only players take longer to get established because they have no history, in a way. But yeah, I mean, I think there is a big question around there, right? Like, what is the question of trust? And how do we build it? And it's like, I think that the point is just like not assume that trust is something that's earned. I think sometimes the risk of saying, you have to trust this because I am telling you this is done well, this is quality news and you have to trust it. We know that's not enough. And I think we need to start thinking more about why. And I think the key is the connection. Like, I think sometimes this presentation feel like a gloomy feeling at the end. It's like, okay, well, that's everything. That's great. It's fantastic, so good. But that's not just what we should focus on. Right? There are many brands that are doing well, that have a good business model based on subscriptions because they build that connection. They've built the idea of really understanding what is the need that the audience has. How am I delivering to them? And then again, the complexity of like different segments of the audiences, but really catering to that, and then really going to deliver to them news that is relevant, that feels understandable, that feels actionable for their life. I think that carries a trust forward. So I believe there is a space, and there will be more space in the future for connections, really true connections with news brands, then bring also a solid business model. But it's a squeezed market, maybe not for all. And that question about trust, I think, is really important. Within that conflict of people saying one thing and then still consuming it.
Thank you so much for sharing all these valuable insights. I was just wondering, and sorry if I missed it in the study, if you ask people on the way that they are applying or not their critical thinking while reading the news, whether they are digital or not.
We don't ask that specifically. And also, there is, I think, especially when we think about younger audiences, there is a point of thinking about what people consider the news. And again, like that fact where we see that people get information from creators many like old school journalists will say like that's not journalism, that's not the news, right? But I think that's why it's important to go back to what audiences think, because like again, it would be too easy to say like, oh, you don't have critical understanding and this is not news, and why? Well, that's what people are doing. And a lot of these creators are talking about relevant, you know, news-driven items. Now, we can discuss if that's the process they got to the information is a journalistic process or not. But I think we need to think about more. There's a point about news literacy and how people are prepared to understand the news, which I think goes back to the idea of like explaining and not taking for granted. So much of political coverage, for example, often in many markets is written for political journalists and for politicians, not for audiences that have a limited understanding. So you can see a lot, for example, now in the US, many publications ahead of the election were doing like the voter guides, like really taking you through like the basics, like how this system works, what are the main topics, and driven not by the agenda by the politicians, set by the politicians, but set by what people are interested in. And I think it goes again, it's a bit of a winded answer, like we don't have that specific question about how they are equipped to understand the news. But I think there is a question around what is news and how do we define it.
We have time for one more question. Yes.
Hi, so you talked a lot about creators. So we can see an increase in trust in them to inform us. So do you think it's an opportunity or a danger for traditional medias?
We don't necessarily see an increase in trust. We see an increase in consumption. I think but you know, there might be a correlation that like just people just tend to go to the voices that they find hopefully credible or interesting. I think there is an opportunity in terms of like try to analyze and understand what makes these creators connect and cut through with the audience, right? It's just too easy to dismiss and say they're not serious or whatever. Like they are connecting with some audiences. Why? What makes a difference? And I think the opportunity is to understand that. I think the opportunity is that this is telling us that there is interest, especially in the younger generation, about some serious topics. It's not just about silly videos. There is a very engaged generation that wants to understand the world, that wants to understand the climate challenge, that wants to understand what's happening. I think the opportunities around learning from what creators are doing in terms of language, in terms of tone of voice, and of course, applying the criteria of what we believe being quality, trustworthy journalists, that's all still relevant, that's all still there, we shouldn't applicate to that, but really trying to merge it. I think a slightly sort of like side question is about journalists who sort of like become stars, right? Journalists who maybe were working for a legacy publisher and then get a following on their own, newsletters, podcasts, and sort of like drive that away from the publication. Some publications are cultivating them. Ezra Klein, the New York Times, that's very much the Ezra Klein show, right? It's all branded around him. The challenge is how to bring the two together and what's the advantage for a journalist superstar to go out on their own versus staying within a publisher. So I think it is an opportunity, but of course, in a very fragmented environment where attention is very divided across many platforms and across many people, this is just like one more thing to look out for as a publisher.
Thank you so much. That was really insightful. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.